welcome to you all for this presentation. But I am going to present a few minutes based on our experience working with sex workers community in Calcutta. In the process of this development dialogue and the activities that we have undertaken following some basic guiding principles of human development, the sex workers collective came into existence as one of their strongest organizations globally, which represent more than 65,000 sex workers, both female, male and transgender. But before entering into that, let me explain. When you talk about sex workers, I think many of you will start actually questioning who are those, what are those women, and why we are so passionate about women who are in sex work. Well, these are just same or similar women who are walking in the streets and others. Most of these women belong to low socio-economic and caste background. India has a caste system, and having very limited knowledge and skill, they are left out with very few choices in the labor market. But they are determined to try out new options to improve the quality of life of theirs and of their family members. So they moved from villages to cities, and coming to the cities, what are the options left to them? Either they can work as a domestic worker or as a washerwoman. Some of them may find opportunity in construction worker where they work as a helper, and some of them may try sex work. But among all these migrants, I think, as I explained, that choices are limited. Choice is a social construct, as they have basic knowledge and marketable skill is less, I think, available among these categories of women. So they have 3-4 options. But out of those, sex workers are more vulnerable to various kinds of diseases, including violence, sexual violence, and many other such things. Why this is so? It is not because they have no agency, they have no capability. It's not that fact. I think this is very important, but I like to explain that when you talk about development and others, we try to think in one sort of way how we can make services or access to credit available to people, those who belong to underprivileged sections. And we felt that this is the only way to help development of those poorer sections. But when you focus on these marginalization issues, and when you talk about women in sex work, it is not because of their lack of agency or their capability, but the fact is that it is the government rules, policies and legislation in one hand, and on the other hand, social attitude and practices towards sex work, and those who are engaged into this sex work. So that's why one law regulates sex workers, which essentially absorbs rights of sex workers. The sex trade structure, it is neither legal nor illegal in our country. It hovers in the twilight zone. So it essentially delimits their ability to collectivize and to praise their issues or agenda. And as a result of which, they are often stigmatized, discriminated against, and fourth but not the least is that existing political norms and practices what prevent them in representing their views and challenges in decision making fora. In any development discourse, it is the very community for whom we are thinking about, they need to be incorporated or to be engaged into any discourse for development, any change in policies or any sort of change in the legislations. But unfortunately, this is one such community who are never ever given space to engage into any policy level discourse. Those are the primary issues for which I think development of these communities are thwarted and not really improved till we started this program in one of the largest red light districts in city Calcutta called Sonaraj, where more than 7,000 sex workers live and sell sex services. While we started this program, essentially I am an epidemiologist and a medical doctor. We started this program with the sex workers from the point of I think concern that if you do not engage or if you do not start any sort of effective HIV intervention program among the sex workers, we would be in a big problem where HIV could engulf the country as a whole. That was the fear and apprehension. So when we started working with the sex workers, it is not out of any ulterior motive or any sort of good wishes for the sex workers primarily. I know this is a very harsh word. We started this program to save or to protect the mainstream society, to protect the country from getting HIV as an epidemic. But sooner we realized, until and unless we engage them in the discourse of health interventions, we won't be able to get their support to contain the spread of HIV epidemic. And in so doing, we felt that what are the barriers for which they are unable or incapable of exerting their agency to make their practices safer. In fact, HIV prevention during that time was simplest thing is that you have to protect yourself from getting HIV as you are engaged in an occupation where you have to entertain number of clients. So vulnerability towards HIV is the highest among the sex workers all across the world. This Calcutta is no exception. But only preventive tool what we had in our hand is the use of condoms, so that they can negotiate effectively with their clients, because condom will be used by the client themselves. But because of their social and marginalized status, they are unable to negotiate effectively with their clients. So we felt that why they are unable to do that. So as I said earlier, it is certainly the structural barriers which includes laws, policies and legislations. On the other hand, the other side of the coin is that they themselves used to consider themselves as bad and fallen women. It is not just society considered them as fallen women, as greedy women, as bad women, but in the process they internalize the same thing. So if someone do not feel respect for themselves, if they do not have the dignity, how we can use an individual, a community to fight against a dreaded disease like HIV, because that was our focus. So we felt that we must help improve their self-esteem. We should help them to collectivize, to fight for their own rights, including their ability to contain HIV transmission. So in the process we felt that to improve this self-esteem, we need to change or to influence their social identity. So that's the why we came from the word prostitutes to sex workers. that is carving a new social identity, which is very important for any development program, particularly if you look into marginalized community like indigenous people, like in a country like ours where caste division is so high. Even the father of the country, Mahatma Gandhi, felt the necessity to address untouchability, and he renamed them as Harijan or similar other terminology. He used to change this mindset of the people. How far it was successful or not, that's a different issue altogether. But what I like to press here, that the oppressed categories of people, say underprivileged sections of people, until and unless at points of time you try to carve a new social identity for themselves, it is extremely difficult to move them forward, to help improve their quality of life, to change their destiny. And second important thing, we felt that collectivizations and activism should be incorporated as part of development discourse. If you do not do that, simple making services available and accessible to them will not make much change. So how we actually translate all those understanding into activities? One was there. Usually all development program, but what we do in development program, actually basically two things. Either we provide knowledge and education to build the awareness so that one can actually take decision, appropriate decision for himself or for herself. And second, we try to provide services which are basic, which are needed for their own development. So this is usual discourse of development, but we go beyond that. We felt that we have to address the issues what underlying behind their marginalizations, behind their pauperizations. And to do that, we essentially recruited them in case of HIV prevention program as health workers. We do not actually pose ourselves as the only teacher for themselves. We felt that they should take the responsibility to address their issues with their communities or with their collectives. They could communicate much better. Secondly, whatever services are required, be it in case of HIV, I said during that time it was only available tool was condom, so they should actually guide us how to help accessing condom by their colleagues or their friends, as well as they should actually play the role of a gatekeeper, as well as help designing and developing what could be the service provisions, how it could be delivered by them. So all those approaches and activities, as I explained earlier, by 1995 they came up with their own organizations, which is called Durbar. Durbar means unstoppable. So this is Durbar, and we follow very simple sort of policies. We call it 3R. One is reliance. We felt that they have the agency. I think those who are actually well acquainted with development discourse, we trust and believe in that each and every individual has the agency, and if you can really create an environment where they can exert their agency, they can change their destiny. That's the course of development. So we felt they may not be knowing HIV the way I understand, or they may not be knowing how market operates, but they have their own understanding and knowledge working in an environment, in a sex-straight scenario, and how their knowledge, how their wisdom can be channeled into development discourse. So that's the basic thing of relying on their knowledge and wisdom. We felt we should respect them just like any other human being, just like any other occupational groups. We should not actually consider them as something aberrant, something unusual, or they are not as equal partners of development. And third, we should recognize them as a worker, as they are engaged into a livelihood options. It may not be, sounds very nice, or from our moral standpoint, we may not like it. But the fact is that they maintain their family. They maintain their family means it's not like sex workers are individuals. They have their families. At least in Southeast Asia, including India, 90% of them do have their children, and they engage into the sex work to maintain a better, I think, earning options, so that they can put their children in schools, they can put their daughters in better sort of systems, and to provide supports to their ailing parents, father, mother, and even distant brothers also. So, well, I think rest of the things are, lot of service components are there. DMSC presently run, I said, we started in Sonagachi, but now it has expanded throughout the state of West Bengal. And they cover sex workers, their children, as well as the clients. And these peer workers, which I started to begin with, that we recruited sex workers and trained them as a health worker, was the better link between us, the professional people, and the sex workers, just to fulfill the objective of HIV prevention program. But over the years, they take up the role and expanded it further, played as an agent of social change. They essentially come up with lots of different issues which affect their day-to-day practices, which affects their future dreams and aspirations, which includes police harassment. Their children were not actually accepted by the school authorities to get them admitted. In fact, when I started this program in 1992, I approached to many school board leaders, headmasters, to get them admitted into the school. They, after listening all those stories, said, "Dr. Jana, you are nice persons, you are doing good things. Health is a good thing, but don't request me to put them in the school. They will pollute the environment, and other children belonging to mainstream society, their parents will not actually like it to happen, so they will withdraw, so I cannot do that." Well, that was one of the biggest problems, that they were unable to put their children in formal schooling. And also various social citizenship rights and others were denied to them. So we felt that it's not just asking or demanding only services, they have to engage into various kinds of activism and advocacy, not just only for services, but to change the existing policies and program what marginalizes them. So this was the first time probably in city Calcutta where sex workers make them visible. Though they are living in the cities, but they are invisible in the eyes of mainstream people, to policy makers, to administrators. So they come up as a group of individuals who organize street processions as early as 1995 and 6. Followed by they incorporate many other activism like sit-in demonstrations, like influencing media and academia, so that their existing image, which is, I think, many of you possess in your minds, that they have no agency, they are the victims of the situations, and they are really not good kind of women, quote and unquote. So that very image has to be challenged. They felt strongly, and then they felt that we cannot reach each and every individual to explain who we are, why we are in sex work. Rather, we have to influence media and academia. So before coming to this institute, since 1995, the sex workers collective organized a lot of workshops in Calcutta University with the Department of Sociology, Political Science, Economics, Anthropology, not only in Calcutta University but in Jadavpur, Presidency and many other institutes, where they used to sit in one side of the discussion table, and the other side all those academic people, teachers, professors and students. So there used to be some debate or discussions they were allowed to basically questions whatever they feel. I think people representing academia, and they used to interact, and in those interactive sessions many of these renowned I think writers, painters, film directors, those who know Bengal like Gautam Ghosh, Sunil Gangopadhyay and many others, Samarjit Majumdar, attended those discourse, and they became one of the sort of ambassador for sex workers' rights movement later on. Well, when I am explaining all those things, as if I am talking about development, but our primary role was to contain HIV. So until and unless we could show to the world that by helping and collectivizing sex workers, helping them to engage into activism, will not be accepted by the, I think, global policy makers until and unless we could show to the world that through this mechanism we have cut down the transmission of HIV, which was significantly for HIV, for sexually transmitted infections. It was unbelievable for many of them, and as a result of which WHO and others constituted several evaluation teams, one year after another. They evaluated the program, and ultimately they had to accept, to address HIV among the marginalized community, we need to help collectivize them and actually put them as the implementers and decision makers of the program. And over the years, this concept was articulated as creating enabling environment, and second is community organizing and ownership building. That two components became an integral part of HIV prevention program. It sounds very simple, but it's not. It's a huge paradigm shift in the public health discourse. So if you consider about disease control, be it tuberculosis, malaria and others, it's all expert who decides what would be the best way to tackle the chain of transmission of disease, to stop the transmission, where infected and affected peoples are never ever asked to take part in this discourse of policy making for disease control. But it is the Sonagachi sex workers taught to the world that until and unless you really bring the community, and this community organizing and ownership building and creating enabling environment is an integral component, means it's not a theoretical part. These two components are all budgeted. Money has been allocated for that. And over the years, now all development agencies, be it UNDP, UNFPA, UNAIDS, means all UN agencies and major donors like Bill and Melinda Gates foundations, like many other bigger donors like DFID and others. In fact, Melinda Gates, she herself spent one full day in the red light districts in Sonagachi, because she wanted to learn why we became successful and how it could be replicated in other states, in other countries. Well, I think this is the primary sort of I think message what we like to communicate to you. Rest actually followed as part of their collectivization process. They felt that, well, health is an important issue and we need to protect ourselves from HIV infections. we need to protect ourselves from syphilis, gonorrhea, but at the same time, we need to know and learn. So, to begin with, we started a non-formal education program. It's very interesting. If you see today, that we know all of us are actually accessing different, particularly just few minutes back we are discussing with Salini how demonetization has really created problem for the commoner people. But the sex workers, since its inception, were not allowed to access even the bank, insurance companies, etc., etc., because they were considered bad women, fallen women. So their access to all this institution was stopped. Not only that, the existing law in our country says that one has to have, no one can actually provide any rent to sex workers. As a result of which, they cannot produce residential proof to the bank to open an account. So when we started this program in 1992, none of them, except very few, 4 or 5 out of 7,000 sex workers living in the Sonagachi red light district, maybe 7 or 8 has only bank account. Rest used to depend on the grey market, where they used to take loan, an exorbitant interest rate. Once I calculated, it was as high as 300% per annum. That was the minimum most. So they felt that they need to develop something for themselves. So they have their own, presently they have their own cooperative banking system of their own, and where more than 25,000 members are putting their money, taking loan whenever there is necessity for them in exigencies and all. And their annual turnover in Indian terms is around 30 crores, maybe around 5 million US dollars. It is their own money, and before they started this own cooperative society, it was all these money lenders and the middlemen who used to squeeze them. They have their own cultural unit also. They felt that we should have our own unit so that we can so that we can actually provide our messages, we can spread our messages to ourselves. They have their sports academy, and these children of sex workers has excelled in football. In not only in Bengal, they represent Indian team also. And it's very interesting, 2006, government wanted to criminalize sex workers as well as the client of sex workers. And the Sonagachi sex workers organized a parliament march, they call it, where more than 5,000 sex workers gathered in the streets of Delhi to stop criminalizations of clients and sex workers. They also have created their own self-regulatory mechanism through which it has been now accepted by the Supreme Court, constituted panel how to address trafficking in sex work. Sex workers themselves show to the world that they can create a self-regulatory mechanism to identify any new, young or unwilling sex workers from the first instance and remove them from the sex work so that it can be free from criminalities. They felt that as we considered it is an work, we are also responsible to stop happening this sort of child labor or any unwilling women. So there are 33 SRBs functioning, and if you see over the years, the percentage of girls below 18 years, which was around 25% in 1992, has been brought down below 2% in 14, and the median age has gone up. I think they have their education program. They are both formal and non-formal. The sex workers collective run their own hostels where around 80 children of sex workers live, and now they are mainstream, studying in mainstream. And to propagate all those things, they use this sort of approach which is called Mela to reach out people of different sections of life who can come talk with them and So these are some of these melas which was held in different parts of the cities where thousands of commoners attended, interacted, so that they can understand who the sex workers are and how they operate. Well, now sex workers collective Durbar, till this point I said that what they did for themselves, but now they are one of the champions of the marginalized workers.